one of the other important questions about product management that I wanted to ask you, which is many early stage builders and founders themselves start as PMs, where they start thinking about the problems to solve, and like we were just discussing about the different paths to explore, and then see which one would be more profitable at the time being, and then solve for it and ship things. From your experiences, what would you call as the first three things, let's say, somebody should focus on as they just start this PM journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially as founders in early startups, the first thing that you should figure out is absolutely product market fit, right? I know a lot of people talk about that, but what I really mean by that, I think, are two aspects. One is, how do you frame your product problems space? I think a lot of us tend to be very overly narrowly thinking about the problem that we're solving, and we're almost fell in love with the solution, so that we think about validating it, think about driving growth to that solution without really validating, is the problem we're solving, like, is it big enough a space that you as the company can uniquely position to solve it? And what solution you can. And so I think figuring out that is absolutely number one priority. And there's a lot of literature written about how do you measure it, how do you figure it out. I think the Lean Product Playbook is one good resource to find that. And I would say one example that stuck with me quite a bit recently was, so when the importance of framing problems space, right? So think about Disney. A couple of years ago, what would be the complaint during like summer seasons? It would be the wait time for a ride is way too long, right? If that's how you frame the problem, then what is going to be your immediate solution? You're going to want to create more rides, increase the capacity of the park, build more park. And guess what the result ends be? Like, you're going to spend a lot of money buying a lot of things. And when it comes to winter or whatnot, the other times when there's like down season, you're going to have a lot of empty space, right? Like, utilization is going to go down. So what they did instead is reframe the question from like, the wait time is too long, to the wait time is too annoying. So how can I make the wait time less annoying? So then they create things like parades, maybe build more food stands, so that, yes, you still have to wait 2 to 3 hours for some popular rides, but hey, in the meantime, you have some other stuff to do that kind of distracted your attention, right? The fast pass and things like that. So it opens up the space for a lot more solution. So that's, I think, one great example to kind of illustrate the point of like, hey, you should think about, what exactly is the right problem to solve, and frame it in such a way that opens up non-obvious solution, and make it broader and with more opportunity and rooms to solve and to grow. So that's number one, how you frame the problem space and find product market fit. I think the other things that founders need to do is just being able to get really close to your user and be open-minded. I think it's all related to finding product market fit as well. But how can you, I guess, like, flex your communication skills as you pitch your idea? When you talk to an investor, it's going to be different from when you talk to an end user. How can you learn how to do that and like keep an open mindset? You also have to be pretty well-rounded, right? Like, when you talk to an investor to get funding, it's going to be a different pitch. You need to understand the VC sort of environment versus how you actually interview a user, and not try to ask leading questions. And so having a well-rounded skill set and being open-minded, I think being curious and open-minded is the first step to be able to learn so many things so quickly. Last but not least, I think, is this notion of like, how do you find leverage? I think earlier in my career, I tend to like focus on the execution. Or when I have an idea, I would immediately jump onto like, okay, how do I do it? How do I execute? Here, especially in a startup environment, I think there's a lot of trade-off you need to make. And I would strongly encourage people to think about, how can you think smartly such that you validate whether your idea is good or not in the shortest period of time, and then embrace this kind of optimizing ROI, while balancing like long-term, short-term thinking. So what are the the quickest things you can try to validate your assumption, right? What are the things you can build that will give you the highest leverage, the biggest return, versus just anything you can do? So a sense of prioritization, I think, is auto, but not just prioritizing, but also with
de-risking the whole situation.
Yes, like how can I validate that it's working in the fastest path, right?
Yeah. No, I think that sounds great. So reframing the question spot on the Disney example. Another example that comes to my mind is the lift one, where they say if there are more people waiting for taking the elevator, like do you build more elevators or do you put a mirror right there? So people just don't find the wait time annoying. So I think reframing the question is such an important point, because most often as PMs, I've done this mistake as well, where we often jump into solutions. We're like, hey, I think I know what this problem is, so let me just go into solutioning. But often when we think about it, it wouldn't have been the right problem in the first place. So that's such a solid point to think about. And yeah, I think over to the de-risking point as well that you mentioned. How do I know something of this is worth to work on in the less time that I have in hand?